Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jenna Alexander. I'm the president of Virginia PTA, and I want to welcome you tonight to Reading Together, our webinar for families. For those of you that aren't familiar with Virginia PTA, we are the oldest and largest nonpartisan volunteer-led child advocacy association in the United States and in Virginia. And we provide family engagement and nonprofit support for about 900 schools across the Commonwealth. And as a community of parent volunteers, we work really hard to make sure that we're connecting parents with information and resources that support their students' academic success. And that's what we're here to do with you tonight. As we all know, reading is the foundation of academic success. And over the past 2 years, as a result of really strong advocacy that many of you participated in, the General Assembly passed the Literacy Act, which is transforming the way Virginia teaches reading instruction into a more comprehensive statewide approach that uses scientifically based reading research and evidence-based practices to do instruction, intervention, and assessment. So I am delighted to have the Virginia Department of Education here with us tonight. And they're going to share an update with how we're doing on implementing the Literacy Act and then give us some tips and resources that we can use to support our students in their reading journey. If you're not familiar with the platform, I want to just take a quick minute and do a little housekeeping with you. You should have a panel on the side of your screen. This is a little bit different. You should see a box that pops out that says questions. And there were so many excellent questions that were submitted, and I've shared all of those with the Department of Education. And so if you have other questions tonight, please feel free to put them in the chat. If we don't get to them tonight, we will definitely come back. Maybe we'll even organize a follow-up if there's still a lot of interest out there. And so I just want to welcome you to enjoy tonight. And if you have any questions or anything, you can also, I think there's also a raise your hand feature that you can use. All right, and I will turn it over to Dr. Coons, the Superintendent of Public Instruction for Virginia Public Schools.
Well, Jenna, thank you for having us. I could not think of a better way to spend our evening than talking about literacy. It's like my favorite thing, and I'm extremely passionate about all the work that's happening in Virginia. I cannot tell you how often I get to speak to other people from other states and tell them that I wish they were here, because it is a very lucky place to be because of the legislation and the focus really on a continuum of K-8. And we are the first state across the country that not just focuses on early grades, but really focuses on the continuum of literacy that takes a child from learning to read to reading and reading content to really developing those skills into reading, writing, literacy, speaking, and really having that comprehensive approach. So I'm really proud to be a part of Virginia and around the work that we are doing on literacy. We are in our last year of preparation for the Literacy Act. So we have started a lot of work with our school divisions, getting them ready. They are currently selecting materials and curriculum to teach literacy in the classroom. And so they have gone through a process of looking at the state approved list. And that list is constructed of materials that have gone through a very rigorous process to make sure that they are teaching our children the right way to learn to read and the right developmental process of becoming expert readers. So we are very excited that that list has been produced and that school divisions are working diligently to select those materials. In addition, we've had thousands of reading specialists trained across the Commonwealth to support schools in this transition. Our superintendents are working on their literacy vision and what they believe is strong literacy practices for each of their school divisions, and our teachers and principals will be going through training this summer. We have also, as a department, worked on our English language arts standards, and those standards of learning are really the underpinning behind the materials and behind the training to make sure that teachers have a North Star of where they want students to be and how they want students to be successful by the end of each grade. So excited that that work is happening in our schools, but we also want to support our families. So I'm very thankful that we have several families and several interested people on the call tonight who want to really make an impact on literacy in your child's life. So we're going to talk a little bit about early children, and then we're going to talk about a little bit of older children. So if you have young children, and young children at home can be anywhere from 2 to 3 years old to 6 or 7 years old, one of the most important things we can do as family members is talk and develop language and share language about what is that blue wall? Is that a dark blue? Is that a light blue? Is that a sea blue? Is that an ocean blue? And giving our children language. We are baking a cake today. What do we put in a cake? How do we measure? Well, these are dry ingredients. Let's talk about liquid. Oh, we've got to have eggs in a cake. When we talk and build language with our children, we are building their vocabulary. And it's one of the strongest things we can do with families is really spend time having conversations and building language for our children. Because what is natural for us is talking, communicating, and speaking. And as a child builds that spoken vocabulary, and then they learn to read, which is not a natural process, they've already got a bank of words in their vernacular that help them when they're approaching, whether it's a text about some amazing story that they're learning about, or some historical event or science. When they're reading those different opportunities in school, it is important for us at home to be building that vocabulary and those opportunities to really develop language. So first and foremost, as families, talk. Have conversations in the car, have conversations in the kitchen, have conversations out and about when you're with your children to help them really build that vocabulary and that language. What we also know is that sounds are the building blocks of reading. So hearing words, hearing language, hearing that repetition also builds the sound vocabulary for our youngest children. And we want to make sure they have sounds and they hear those sounds, because when the teacher starts working on learning to read, a child with sounds and vocabulary finds it easier to learn to read faster. So those are important things for our children. Second, make sure you're reading to your child, whether it's reading books that you have at home, whether it's going to the library and finding books to read, or having the opportunity to just read and read 20 minutes a day. Building that time of reading places an importance of reading at home, and it helps you build that relationship with your child and helps them model those things that they're seeing with you as you're reading to your child. And last but not least, one of the most important things I can ask for all our families is connect with your child's teacher. As your child starts preschool, as they start kindergarten, and as they start early grades, it's very important that you have the opportunity to talk with your child's teacher. Ask how they're doing. What are they reading in school? What can you be talking about at home? Are they studying something in science? Are they learning about weather or clouds or dinosaurs? Are there things to build conversations at home that help build that connection between home and school? Are they reading about things that you could read about at home? Are they reading stories that you want to reread at home? It's an important opportunity to have those conversations and know what's happening in the classroom so that you can support what's happening in the classroom. In addition, if you have concerns, if you feel like your child's reading is behind, or you feel like your child is not hearing certain sounds, those are important conversations to have with your child's teacher. As we started in the first conversation, our teachers are being trained, our principals are being trained, and we have reading specialists across the Commonwealth helping our teachers in our schools. And it's an important opportunity that families reach out to their schools if their children are struggling, or if you feel like there's something going on, or if you feel like your child isn't being challenged. If your child is really reading and having a rich vocabulary and diet of reading at home, and you want them to be challenged at school, really reach out to your teacher and have those conversations, but because that connection at school is very important. Most importantly, as family members, we don't have to be reading experts. We aren't going through this reading specialist training. We aren't being trained as teachers, and we're not asking families to teach their children to read. I think that is the job of the school and it is the job of the teacher. We hope that families can, one, make sure that you're talking to your child, building those sounds and language so that those experiences at school can build upon the opportunities a child has had at home to have experiences in language and discussions. Two, spend time reading with your child. Take time to read things that your child enjoys. You can read, they can read a page, but build that reading time into your schedule and show your child that it's important and that literacy matters. Third, make sure you're talking with your child's teacher. As you start in preschool, as your child moves into kindergarten, as they move into early grades, and as they move into upper grades, what is happening in the classroom? What can you be doing to talk about the things that are happening in the classroom? Are there things that during reading time you might enjoy reading that complement the things that are happening in the classroom? And if you feel your child is struggling, the most important thing to do is share those struggles with the teacher and help connect with the reading specialist and the other members in the school that can support your child. Next, it's really important for you to be able to have those conversations if your child is bored. So again, make sure that you are practicing those sounds in that language, spending time reading, and then connecting with your classroom teacher. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about literacy. It is our favorite thing, and I'm really excited about our schools that are gearing up to be supportive and really think about the Virginia Literacy Act, make sure we're moving into evidence-based reading instruction, using those really strong materials, learning the training that they're learning now to deliver great lessons, and to support the practices that we need to make sure every child can read at the end of 3rd grade and have strong literacy skills to be successful in life. So thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to open this discussion up and have more conversations. I know that all of our names say Lisa Coons, but I am going to turn it over to Melissa Duvall. She is our Director of Parent Engagement at the agency. She does everything from talking to parents about struggles and issues they may be having with their school to sharing resources about assessments, about your child's SOL scores, about things you might want or need in literacy, and has built up a wealth of resources. So I'm going to ask Melissa at some point to put her information in the chat, because you're going to want to be able to connect with Melissa and her team, because they provide a lot of opportunities for support and a lot of opportunities to connect with resources. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Coons. I am delighted to be here. Jenna, thank you so much for this opportunity. I want to just spend just a brief moment of gratitude in the few minutes I have before you all to just thank Jenna and Lisa, Dr. Coons together, because this opportunity in Virginia is truly unique. We're really taking the opportunity to lead with science-based instruction using the best tools from across the country, and that leadership takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to look at teachers and say, we support you. And some of our teachers are also parents. And so how do we balance that conversation of change? So it is my honor to serve in this role, and I would be delighted to continue the conversation after this evening. But I am just here a few minutes to present some opportunities, as Dr. Coons mentioned, to understand how our child is reading, how your child is reading in school. And there are just a few tools that we have developed this school year in response to some of this really aggressive and necessary change. I say aggressive in the best way, because some change cannot wait. And so it is a little daunting sometimes when we see a student, our child, enjoy school until school gets harder. And sometimes reading is the reason why. So what we have done is we've really thought deeply with our educators as partners to think about, and alongside our parents, what can be done when students find that struggle in school around literacy. And so one of the biggest things that we can do is we can look at data. And so as a parent of 2 kiddos, a former school principal, the numbers can tell us a story, right? But they can also be a little confusing because they might conflict with other numbers, such as a report card grade. So one of the things that is really important is to take some time to look at data. So the Department of Education this school year started creating parent score reports. The first report you saw, or may have seen, we hope you've seen, was actually published this past winter. This is a report that shows growth between those tests for reading, particularly in grades 3 through 8. And I'm going to drop a link to those resources as soon as I turn it over to my colleagues for their presentation, so that you can bookmark those resources that are found on the Virginia Department of Education's website. So the growth report, the parent report in particular, is really powerful because it breaks down, is my kid passing or failing? And what if both, right? Because what if they're excelling particularly in math or science? What do we do about that? Where could we take that opportunity to grow further through enrichment, or really start to narrow in very deeply and closely on the gaps, on the places where students are not yet excelling? So in these reports are embedded resources, which is just a really easy thing for parents to see all the questions that they need answered on one single page. Another thing that we've done is we've created that conference tool, that co-planning tool that Dr. Coons was mentioning, because once you see the data, we don't want you to be a reading expert. We don't want you to feel that pressure. That's not your job, but your job as a parent is a tremendous one. It is the most influential one in your child's life. I don't know how many of you are Ted Lasso fans, but I believe it was season 2 where Roy is emphasizing to his friend Keely that kids just want to be around their parents. They just want to be around the adults that they love in their life. And there was an opportunity to ask his nephew, do you want to go with me to the podiatrist? And she said yes, because she loves her uncle. So there is so much power within your relationship with your children that you just need that, and maybe some key questions. So we've developed a few guides that go along with these growth assessments in reading and in math that help our families plan for that conversation with teachers, especially if we're not seeing the growth that we expect, especially when our students are maybe thriving in school, but then come home and they just kind of unleash, right? Because you're their safe space. So we've got some really concrete tools to share with you all this evening that will hopefully help bridge that gap between what our educators are really working hard to do in the classroom and what you're working hard to do at home. They're not different, they're one and the same, and we're really excited to share that with you. So at this time, I'm gonna turn it back over to Dr. Coons, who may want to speak a little bit more to that or turn it over to one of our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm really excited to share those resources. I know the team has been working very hard and almost finished with some of the resources for spring reports. So excited that we are really leaning in to make sure that when you look at those student reports, you can really see where your child is and be able to ask great questions for those reports. And excited to see some of the additional resources they're going to be sharing, and we'll make sure that Jenna gets those as they're updated so she can push them out to all of the PTA. Very thankful for that. And then mine keeps bouncing. Christine, you are here, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful. Really excited to have Christine Harris. She is our new Executive Director of Educator Partnerships at the agency. And she is really working to elevate teacher voice and make sure that our teachers are well represented in the department and that our principals and all of our educators have the opportunity to really lean into the supports for schools, but also our supports for families. And she's been working really hard to be out in the field and make sure that we are connecting with all of our educators. So definitely reach out to Christine Harris. She is also not Lisa Coons, but she will put her contact information in the chat and make sure that we all have that information as well, because these are two great resources for everyone who's on this call tonight, whether you are an educator and a parent, as Melissa talked about, or if you are an educator and really excited and want to know more about the Virginia Literacy Act or need more resources. Christine is a great advocate for educators across the Commonwealth. And, you know, she has been the author of Teacher Direct for a long time. And that's how we snatched her up and said, you are an amazing communicator. And you really think about educators all the time. So excited to have her and have her partnership in this. And just want to echo, Melissa did a fabulous job of reminding me to thank us all. It is 7:30 on a Wednesday night, and you are all here talking about literacy, and we cannot be more thankful for your commitment and your dedication to your children and your students. And Jenna, thank you for hosting us and giving us the opportunity to chat. So Christine, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Coons. And again, I'm Christine Harris. If you like what I have to say, if you don't like what I have to say, I am Lisa Coons. Thank you for the opportunity. And I also would like to echo thank you to Jenna and to the PTA. As a longtime PTA member, I know the hard work and dedication that goes into this work and supporting schools. So thank you. I would like to share with you some updates about the literacy screeners. So for many in Virginia, our schools have used a literacy screener, commonly known as PALS, the Phonological Awareness Literacy Screener, to ensure that all students were on track to be strong readers. And so some new information, we have a new and improved screener being developed by the Virginia Department of Education and our partners at UVA, the Virginia Literacy Partnership, and it's called VALS, and that stands for Virginia Language and Literacy Screener. And it's currently being piloted around the Commonwealth. And so you might be wondering, why is the screener being changed? And Dr. Coons did a great job talking about some of those reasons, but I'll just reiterate them for you. So research has led to ways that we can improve the teaching of reading, and Virginia is now aligning our screener to this research. And I want to highlight a few things about VALS and the revised screener, and I will put a link in the chat when I'm done sharing these with you so that you can do your own research about the VALS. So the VALS will be a more comprehensive screener, and it will expand the coverage of skills that will be assessed for students. And this information will allow for a measurement of growth over time, and it will access across grade levels because the screener will now extend to pre-K 3-year-olds and continue to go up to 3rd grade. And it will also include a parallel screener in Spanish, and that's something we currently don't have. It's anticipated that the new VALS screener will be ready to provide instructional, useful information to our teachers this fall, 2024. So we're very excited about that information. We have a plethora of resources on our partnership site with the Virginia Literacy Partnership. We have videos that can go into more depth about the screener and some instructional resources for how families can support reading at home. And Melissa did a wonderful job talking about those as well. So in a moment, I will put those resources in the chat for you. But if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me as well as Melissa. And UVA also has some information there for contacts. So we look forward to supporting your work and your journey, supporting your child with reading. Thank you, Dr. Coons.
So, Jenna, part of the time we really wanted to be able to take questions and feedback and any comments from the participants who are here. So if you could help us facilitate any of those questions or ask us some of the prep questions that you had that you want us to kick off questions with, we are more than happy to start with those questions if that would be helpful.
Sure. So let me see. I'll pick one out of the question panel here. It says, what is the plan to support children with dyslexia?
Absolutely. So one of the most important things that our reading specialists are having training in is that dyslexia component, as well as our teachers. And so understanding that starting sounds first, using evidence-based reading research and making sure we are using those clear pieces of teaching reading that are great for all children need stronger emphasis and stronger repetition for our children with dyslexia. And having that component in all of the training, in all of the resources, and all the supplements and intervention is a great way to ensure our teachers have the training, have the resources, and then have the reading specialists with support to make sure those children who are diagnosed with dyslexia have those additional components and those additional strategies in their literacy experiences. Because it's not only about the instruction, it's about some of the additional strategies that help our children with dyslexia become successful. And so really building that tool in that bank, not only with our teachers, but having those reading specialists on hand that are required by the Literacy Act in all of our schools to support with children with literacy challenges.
All right, and I'll just remind everybody too, there's a little question panel on the side, so you can type your questions right into there, and then I'm also going to pull some questions from the ones that you submitted in advance. So one that we have here is, and you might have covered this a little bit, but it's always good to just share. Do you have insight into when the list for approved supplemental and intervention programs is going to be released?
Yes, absolutely. I think we were overwhelmed with the number of supplemental and intervention programs. And one of the things that the University of Virginia, who reviews those, wanted to make sure is that they did their due diligence. So there is a round of materials that are coming before the board in March that will be final approved in April, but there will be another wave of materials to make sure that we have fully vetted all the materials that have been submitted. So the first round of in-print, online, and skill specific, so if they're a fluency specific, or a phonemic awareness specific or a comprehension specific intervention, all of that first round will go before the state board for first review in March and final review in April.
All right, let's see, we have one that was submitted in advance. This is, do you have any strategies for high schoolers that are having reading comprehension challenges that were not discovered earlier? Specifically, some strategies that they could try at home.
Absolutely. I think one of the best things we can do with high school students is take the burden off of reading and comprehending. So sometimes using audiobooks, audio strategies, chunking the text, having someone else read to them is a really important way to take off the pressure of both reading and comprehending, especially when you're reading text that has a lot of vocabulary. So if you're reading science or a historic document, there's a lot of vocabulary in those documents, and it's hard to read, diagnose the vocabulary, understand the vocabulary, and comprehend. So audiobooks, audio recordings of textbooks, those are very important strategies to allow a child to focus on comprehension. Even if you just use some of the apps and some of the apps like Libby that you can get from your library and listen to books and getting in the practice of listening books, high school students can build up their comprehension muscle. So they're not doing both things at once. We always talk about reading as those old stick shifts where you have to do two pedals at the same time as you're learning to read. And sometimes as a high school student, it's overwhelming if you have struggled in the past with fluency and learning to read and comprehension. So sometimes it's easier if you take your foot off the gas of the learning to read and the fluency piece and actually just focus on comprehension with audiobooks. So having some of those audio elements is very helpful.
And then staying with the secondary space, this next one is, can you give some sense of how reading instruction is going to change at the secondary level? And I believe it's in relation to the Literacy Act.
Sure. So the first round of work in the Literacy Act is definitely K-5 and making sure our K-5 teachers are trained. They have materials, they have the interventions, and they have the reading specialists. Recently, the legislature just approved the second round tranche of funding to make sure that we have middle school specialists. So we are going to be rolling out the reading specialists in the middle school grades, which is very important right now to help our children post-pandemic and those one who had challenges, make sure they have a reading specialist in their building. And the next round will be those supplemental materials to make sure that those supplements and those interventions are in place. One of the things we have done at the state level is provided 2 tools, Ignite and Lexia, to school divisions to use with students to give additional support and additional intervention and practice at no cost. So many schools across the Commonwealth have leaned in and started with Lexia or Ignite to support our middle school students with additional intervention time while we are standing up these additional programs to make sure that our children in the upper grades aren't getting further behind. So I definitely ask your school about what they're doing for intervention and what additional time your child is getting with literacy practice, because one of the best things we can do right now for our middle school students who may not have had opportunities in the elementary because of a lot of varying things, including the pandemic, is to give them additional practice, additional time, and additional time with a teacher to help them practice just fluency, practice just comprehension, and kind of putting those skills together because of those missed opportunities in elementary school. And in high school, it's really about additional strategies and making sure that a child has those additional strategies and building their toolkit. So if they struggle with vocabulary, maybe it's about reading those vocabulary words and really getting a grasp first. If it's about that comprehension and they need that additional opportunity to have an audio reading of text. So it's really about thinking about what you build into a high school student's toolbox to help them address those things and help them give practice to those muscles that might not be as strong as others when they're reading, and giving those extra opportunities. And it's important for us all to be thinking about that and making sure our children have those supports and advocating for those supports.
Okay, our next question is, how can I help my child prepare for reading assessments like the VGA, the SOL, or iReadies?
Yeah, Melissa or Christine, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I could just give one little quick piece of advice. So if your child is going to be taking the state assessment, the standard of learning for reading, there are, and I will place this into the chat, there is a released, it's called release test items, and it is a resource that is publicly available. And so these are practice questions, and not only are they questions that students would find similar format, reading paired passages, and having to really just understand how do you use the platform, because sometimes that's a little tricky for kids, especially if they're the younger grades in 3rd and 4th, where this is their first or second time taking a reading test, to practice using the features of the testing platform. So reading a paragraph and having to scroll back through the paragraph, using a highlighter tool, I will place that into the chat because it is very user-friendly, and it does give our students authentic preparation to mirror the real life opportunity that they'll have later this spring to take that SOL, the standard of learning test for reading. So I'll pop that into the chat, but that is one really quick place, and any parent can access it. You don't have to have an account. It's right there on our website for the Virginia Department of Education. And while I have the microphone, I want to do something very quickly. I want to introduce my colleagues joining us this evening here just to support the conversation. They're taking notes, always thinking about what more can we offer to our families in these opportunities. But we have Crystal Jackson and Joy Warren. They are on your screen. You might be seeing their beautiful faces, but I just wanted to introduce them. I forgot to do that earlier. So thank you for being here, team.
And I will just add, we have resources on our website that I will put into the chat, but one of the strongest things you can do is have a conversation with your child's teacher, understanding the data, whether it's from the PALS tool, the VALS tool coming, or other classroom assessments to see where their strengths are and areas that they need to grow, and finding out what those strategies are to help them at home. Whether it's just like Dr. Kuhn said, having those conversations, building on their confidence, chunking the information for them, working with them with their homework, helping to be their advocate and understand what the questions are that they need to help ask the teacher as well to feel more confident in their learning. Working with your child's teacher in the school is an avenue to help them be able, because information is a big area of their success on the assessments.
And I think last but not least, it's not like the big end of unit test. A growth assessment and an end of year test really measure how much your child has learned. So I think reiterating what Christine just said about that regular communication all the way through the year and regularly connecting to see if your child is on track with reading the texts and reading in science or reading in social study, and how's that going? And is there anything you need to support throughout the whole year, will really be the best way to help your child on a growth assessment or an end of year. It's not something you can study for per se, because it's measuring how your child is doing throughout the year. So it's really important to stay connected to your teacher and connected to the work in school and really building those opportunities throughout the year. Thanks, guys.
And we'll stay with the testing theme for just a minute. The next question is, will the VALS assessment support identifying students with dyslexia, or are you developing a separate assessment?
I would see the VALS as the gateway. It's the assessment that is most comprehensive and probably one of the most comprehensive in the country. I'm really excited that I get to be a part of the VALS work, because a lot of screeners are outdated because they don't really look at everything from sounds to words to fluency to comprehension, and really look across the board at all the literacy skills. And they might say, you know, there's something about the way a child is putting letters together, and there's something about the way the child is comprehending. Maybe we should do this deeper screener or this deeper assessment that will do more of a diagnostic on dyslexia. So it is going to generally say there are challenges and maybe recommend additional assessments that can really get at dyslexia. And even if a child is diagnosed with dyslexia, there's different pieces of dyslexia that you want to support and develop and design that toolkit of resources and strategies that are specific to every child. So I think the best part of VALS is it really picks apart how a child is doing with all of the parts of reading and literacy, and helps teachers and helps families understand really, really strong in comprehension. But breaking apart words and understanding how the letters come together with words, that may be something that will hurt a child in 6th and 7th grade when they're reading more complex pieces of literature or text. So I think the best part of VALS is it is much more comprehensive. It gets at all of those pieces and then helps us determine what are the next steps if a child is struggling or potentially might need some dyslexia support.
All right, and our next question, this is somebody with a first grader. And they say, so I have some challenges with getting my son to focus. He gets easily distracted. His eyes keep moving around when we're reading a book, and it's hard to keep his eyes on the page. Could you provide some suggestions for how we can overcome this challenge, and specifically address challenges with identifying the B and the D?
So I think it's parts. So it's smaller parts, smaller amounts of words, smaller practice. Sometimes our children have to build up the reading muscle and the stamina. And one of the things we did in our English language arts standards for our teachers is specifically talked about stamina and how you build that stamina. Just like when you put a child on a bike, they're going to ride that bike for about 3 minutes the first time, right? And then they're going to give it up and want to go do something else. The same thing happens with reading. So maybe picking a very simple book with not a lot of words on each page, so there's an ability for a child to focus on a sentence or smaller amounts of words and getting practice, and then building that up to a book that has more sentences on the page and more opportunities. Because when you start putting lots of words on a page, it's really hard to distinguish between a B and a D and some of those harder words. So really breaking it apart and maybe even looking at just that word. Which one's a B? Which one makes and giving that practice and that opportunity. And if that's not working, I really encourage you to talk to the first grade teacher, because whatever curriculum or materials they're using in their classroom also can help you practice and give you additional practice activities at home. And it's really important to connect that if your child is truly struggling and having difficulties, that those resources in the classroom and bringing those at home and giving additional practice are probably some of the best things that would be supportive.
All right, so this next question says, is there a best place that I can find a list of age-appropriate books or developmentally appropriate books for my 8-year-old? And is it okay if I'm doing the reading at bedtime?
I have an 8-year-old grandson, and my favorite thing to do is either read when he's with me or read on the phone or read on the FaceTime and read to him, because it's such a comforting activity for your child to do the reading. Now, there are times where Mimi will make him read a page. Okay, I've read for a really long time and I'm tired. It's your turn. But that reading activity and that modeling that you're doing, even with an 8-year-old, allows that 8-year-old to hear really great reading, really great fluency, hear the vocabulary, understand it, and follow along with the words. I would really encourage you, if that 8-year-old is reading, to read the words with you, to see what you're doing and understand that. And sometimes take a break and have that 8-year-old read a couple words on the page or read half a page and build their capacity. But that's shared time, and I think it's more than okay for you to read to your 8-year-old.
And just to add to that, the second part of the question, where to find books. Your school library has resources, your public libraries has resources, and ask your teacher. They may have specific apps or resources in the classroom that they use or the school has purchased that they can provide some books and some avenues for you to find some really great literature.
Thanks, Christine. And also ask your teacher where your child is reading at. Because
Yes.
if you're reading to your child, you should definitely be reading at grade level or a little bit higher. If your 8-year-old's trying to read, you want them to practice reading where they're at with you at home, where their reading level is.
And so that next question is right along that same pathway. How can I help my child when we're reading together? And how do I encourage them to practice correct pronunciation?
Sometimes you stop. If you're reading and you're like, that was a hard word for me. Let's practice with them and just pause and practice that pronunciation. If you're seeing your child struggling, then you might read a page and say, hey, that word was really hard when you read it before. Let's practice that word. Or pause your child. If your child just pronounced a word wrong, hey, I'm not sure that's the right word. Let's read it again and let's practice. So paired reading, and Christine talked about this earlier, and shared reading, and you reading a page or you reading a section and having your child read a section is a good opportunity for your child to hear your pronunciation and you giving that great reading and them listening and them doing a little bit of practice. But if they get stuck or they miss a word, it's more than okay to let that stop. What I wouldn't do is have them read the whole book and stop every other line. If they're stopping every other line, they're never getting a chance to comprehend. And you should be doing some of that shared reading to give them the opportunity to practice comprehension and then practice a little bit of reading, then practice some comprehension and back and forth. And really, I would just do what works to make your child feel comfortable and have that reading time. Because reading with you, you're not the teacher, you don't have to be the teacher, but letting them hear and practice listening to you is also an important part of reading.
And I think Dr. Coons kicked off with that and talked about oral language being the building blocks for children to learn how to read, and letting them know your vulnerability that you as a parent may not know the meaning of a word or the understanding of a word, and practicing is really important for them. And she said sounds start with sounds. So that's really a key too with tackling words, new words, and pronunciation.
Kind of in that same space, this next question is, should I encourage my child to help sound out the words? Or do we just read the entire difficult word in one piece, or do we chunk it out? How do we do that?
Words are built on sounds. Sounds turn into letters, letters turn into words. Always go back to the sounds and break the sounds apart, then attach the sounds to the letters and the letters to the words. Your golden rule as a parent is sounds come first. Always work with the sounds and help them make sure your child is hearing all the sounds. Sometimes we talk and read so fast that they don't see all the sounds. And sometimes I tell my grandson, stretch it out. let's really stretch that word out. Let's hear all the sounds in it. So really stretching it and hearing those sounds help your child really hear those sounds in the process.
And so the next one
Can
is,
can I add some things
go
to this
ahead.
space really quickly? There is a huge opportunity here for bilingual families, especially those whose primary or native language is Spanish. The sounds translate. So información and information. There's something similar about that. Their ear is going to pick it up because they've heard their abuela at home, their grandmother, say, necesitas más información. I need more information. Like, what is going on? When they see the word information in English, it is completely legitimate to speak in that native language, especially when making that auditory connection, because they're similar. And we want them to be able to harness that bilingual brain that they're growing up with, because it's such a huge asset. So that brain science validates that piece. As Dr. Kuhn said, everything starts with the sound. And so that is very legitimate for especially our Spanish speaking students.
And staying in that same space then, Melissa, I'll just tack on, like, we have a question here that says, how do I encourage my students that are English as second language learners to get involved and to pick out the right appropriate books to read? So if you had some tips you could share in that space.
The best one, and I know that Dr. Harris has a lot to offer in this space too, the best one is really going back to school. And our students who are English language learners, otherwise widely commonly known as ELL or EL students, there are support specialists in every school that serve students whose native language is not English. And so they're a wonderful resource for bridging what's happening in their English class, where they're expected to read in English, write in English, speak in English. There is that bridge of support. So getting to know that teacher as well, because sometimes in secondary level, that teacher can kind of feel like an embarrassment to some students, like, oh, I don't need that extra support, where in fact, they are just as important as their core classroom teacher. So going back to the teachers in the spaces, I would say that would be a wonderful place to go, because as Dr. Coons was mentioning, we always want to introduce opportunities for literacy at grade level or above. And that particularly is important for our students who are learning a second language, because as they matriculate through all the way up to high school, they're going to be expected to take every SOL, every test that's required for graduation in English. And so there is going to have to be another support, another scaffold for them. And it is widely available in our schools. And if it's not, then the central division, so our school districts, have specialists that would be able to support. And I think that's the best place to go, because there are data sets that those teachers keep that can really drill down and target as to what a kid particularly needs, because our students are acquiring language when they're living in this country everywhere. So where they start maybe in March right now is not where they're going to end up in May, because things can happen so quickly. So I would lean on the teachers who are teaching and supporting their classroom teachers.
Well said.
All right, and our next question is, I'm in a Virginia online school. How is the program, the new reading program, going to be implemented in an online platform, since our time with the teacher directly is very limited?
That's going to be challenging for sure. We know that literacy instruction best happens in person, genuinely. And I don't mean to be negative about that, but research shows us that in-person communication, in-person language development, the sounds that you hear in person are much different than the sounds that you hear in an online environment. So I would make sure that you are doing a lot of that language development, a lot of that reading time, and that you are flagging anything that is a struggle for your child back in the virtual space, and making sure you're connected with the teacher and asking for more supports and resources to make sure that you're getting the language and the sounds components and a lot of reading time at home. So that's an in-person experience to complement the instruction that's happening in the virtual space.
And I think this is our last question, unless somebody else pops a new one into the question box. But there's quite a few questions that all kind of come back to the same theme of just like, my child just doesn't like to read. How do I encourage them to get excited about reading? How do I foster a lifelong love of reading? And how do we make this an integrated and important part of our family to become avid lifelong readers?
I think it starts with that reading time. And I think it starts with you sharing reading. they see you reading, you want to read a book, let's read a part of your book. And then I'm just going to read a part of my book. And it might start as a 5-minute. It might just be a 5-minute strategy that right before bed we sit down and I read 5 minutes, and tomorrow night it might be 8 minutes, and the next night it might be 10 minutes. And it might be mostly you reading and things that anything that your child wants to read, whether it's a silly magazine, whether it's a silly book. I know that there are some things that my grandson reads that I have no desire to read, but it's funny and he likes it. So, we're going to read what he wants to, and really leaning into that interest approach and start small. We really kind of expect our kiddos to sit down and want to read as much as we do. And sometimes that doesn't happen. So start with 5 minutes, add 6 or 7, do a lot of reading. Let your child read a page in the middle and really think about what you're reading and what they want to read. And reading silly cereal boxes is reading and creating a culture of reading. And it's really about leaning into those interests and those opportunities that are exciting to your child.
I would just add to that, there's an opportunity to integrate writing. So if you write about your day, even if you as the parent write about something exciting or special about your child, and then go back and read it together, or write a story or pull out the baby book and read something that was special about your child. Use those opportunities to read anything, anytime, anywhere with your child, so they're just engaged, whether it's about their life or even your baby book, and read about when you were a child, before electricity, in my case, anything that engages them or entertains them, to just capture them. And then once you have them in the palm of your hand, that love of reading will slowly develop with them. So if you can capture them, and maybe through writing, it might just spark some interest there in reading.
All right, well, give us a chance to wrap up. I'm going to put in the chat. Virginia PTA has a page where we try to collect as many reading resources that we can. Some of them are focused on just how you would host a really great family reading event within your school community, just to build some excitement. We'll share out on social media tomorrow. Every PTA, we love playing a good game of bingo. And so we've got a family reading bingo that you can play. We'll share that out on our social media pages, and you can try out some of the different ideas in there just to foster that love of learning. And everybody loves to shout bingo when you get bingo. But other fun things that you can do within your school community, whether it's hosting a literacy scavenger hunt, or doing a story walk, or a literacy escape room, doing a read aloud. We have a lot of resources on our website. I'll get all of these resources that we shared in the chat today, and I'll put them in a special spot in our website. So at least if you can't find them, you can come back over to the Virginia PTA website and find this recording, as well as all of the links. And we'll also put this out on our YouTube, which should, hopefully, assuming the technology works the way it's supposed to, should allow you to listen to it in any language that you want to. And so if you need to share it out, I actually do this with other videos I like to listen to in other languages. You can change the captions and it will automatically translate it for you. So I'll give the Department of Education a chance to wrap up, and thank everybody for being here with us tonight.
Well, I want to thank the parent engagement team, Joy, Crystal, and Melissa, for helping us around really supporting our families and really focusing on literacy and the opportunity. And I want to thank Christine Harris, who is constantly thinking about our educators and how we support them. But Jen, I also want to thank you. You have been such an advocate for parents and PTAs across the state. I am just so proud and incredibly grateful for the partnership you have provided the Department of Education and the ongoing advocacy in every arena to make sure parent voices are heard, whether it's our accountability sessions and making sure they come, and having us come out here, coming to these webinars, or just talking with us about what you are hearing our families need and what they need across the Commonwealth. I'm incredibly grateful for everything you do for the families and the parents and the teachers that you advocate for.
And well, with that, we will say thank you very much. We're delighted to be in partnership with you guys. Hopefully we'll bring some new webinars, so please do keep following us on social media and in your newsletters. We've been sharing some ideas for some other great webinars to share with you. If you'd like to have a second family reading webinar, you can send me an email and let me know that too. We're happy to do that as well. All right, everybody, we'll wish you a good night. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye.